Hello everyone, welcome back to Rosina's kitchen. Now, as you can see, I am not Rosina. I'm taking over for her today because we are going to be making something special. So my name is Chef Mike, or Chef Michael, as you can see on my chef coat right here. And we are going to be making the famous spaghetti and meatballs. Now, this is a family recipe, and it's actually my father's recipe. I will let him explain the family history behind that before we get started.
This is Chef Mike. Today we're going to make spaghetti sauce. This is a family recipe from the Cardinale side. It's very simple.
Thank you, Dad, for explaining that to these lovely people. Sorry, my mustache is coming off. I don't know what happened. But first we're going to start off with the actual spaghetti sauce. Now, I have all the ingredients right here, as you can see. You can see all the ingredients we're going to be using. Now, for this recipe, you're going to be wanting to use a Dutch oven, which I have on the stove over here that you can't see. You'll see it later.
First of all, start out with a nice Dutch oven. It's non-reactive. If you use aluminum, the acidity of the sauce can cause a little metallic taste.
So really, we normally do it in the Dutch oven now. My dad used to do it in a big metal stainless steel pot, but he decided that, well, it kind of had a weird taste to it, so I'm going to use a Dutch oven instead. So that's what we're using. So let's get started making this sauce.
In this Dutch oven, we'll put in about 3 tablespoons of either olive oil or vegetable oil. You want an oil that's somewhat neutral in flavor, not to dominate the tomato flavor.
And get it to a nice temp, maybe about like low medium. First thing you're going to put in your oil is 2 bay leaves. Now, make sure they're like a decent size. If they're a little crumbled and everything, just kind of put like maybe, if they're small, put maybe like 3. So you got your bay leaves, and then you're going to add in some red pepper flakes. Now, I just sprinkle in a tiny bit. My dad gave me a little, all the measurements.
1 teaspoonful of crushed red peppers. You can vary the amount based on how spicy you want it.
So after those are in, you're going to want to add in half of a medium-sized onion. Now, you're doing half because the other half is going to be going into your meatballs. So half a medium onion, and make sure it's a Vidalia or sweet onion. That's the onion you want. Now, we're not going to fully cook these. You want your onions to start turning clear before you add in your garlic. So I like to grab a whisk and just kind of make sure it's all coated into the oil. Now, like I said, you don't want to fry the onions. You want to saute them. So maybe turn down your temp if it starts to get a little, like if it starts looking like it's burning, turn down the temp. So have it about medium-low when you're cooking these.
And we're going to let this saute for about 2 to 3 minutes.
I have Dad's recipe right here. You can tell he has that, doctor's handwriting by how well I can read it. I can read it, it's just, I didn't have it on me at the minute. Now, you can kind of see that these kind of caramelize a little bit and also is a little clear, so now you can add in your garlic. So you're going to want like 2 big size pieces of garlic cloves. Now, I like to do a big size because I love a nice thing of garlic, and Dad always did too, and he did like about a medium sized garlic. So I will say, do not do the elephant garlic, just do the regular old one, because for some reason my dad said something about don't use the elephant garlic for some reason. I can't remember what he said, but just don't use elephant garlic, use regular sized garlic, even though this looks like elephant size. You're gonna wanna mince this. So I got myself this little garlic press, and we're gonna press it in there to mince it.
I like this garlic press because it's really much easier. So you just press it like that and put in the garlic.
You can also hand mince it yourself, you know, obviously chop it up into minced pieces, but this just makes it a little easier. So if you have a garlic press, use a garlic press. 1 garlic, 2 garlic. Now you can add as much garlic as you want. I'm not gonna stop you. I just think 2 big size of garlic should probably be enough for a garlic flavor. If you're a garlic lover like myself, add a little more, but I'm gonna follow Dad's recipe because he's very OCD and I don't want him to haunt me. So now that your garlic's in there, kind of whisk it in and let it sit and cook for about...
And then only for about 30 seconds.
And then you'll be ready to put in your tomatoes that you need for your sauce. All right, now that it's been a minute,
30 seconds.
We're gonna add in the tomatoes that you're gonna need. So my dad's recipe says puree, but unfortunately I could not find the right size can for puree, and not with this brand that we use. So I found something similar, and it's just plain old sauce. So we get this brand, it's Contadina, and you wanna use about a 15-ounce can for your puree. Now, like I said, I can't find the size of puree anymore. I don't know what happened, but this is what we're gonna use. Now, if you wanna use a different can that's puree, that's the same size, a 15-ounce, you can use whatever you want, but I will say, never use Hunt's. Do not use Hunt's. The Hunt's brand for this, I will come to your house and I will give you a stern talking to. Or I will have my dad haunt you, because my dad never did Hunt's. He told me for some reason it's because it was too sweet and it just did not taste right. So don't do Hunt's, I beg of you. If you don't want my dad to haunt you, don't do Hunt's. Do Contadina if you can find it. If not, use anything else besides Hunt's. Just don't do it, please. So once that can's empty, you're gonna wanna use this can again, and you're gonna fill this up 3 times with water. So 3 cans worth of water.
I prefer hot water because then the cooking process will not be interrupted.
1, 2, and 3. Now the reason why you use the can is to get the rest of the sauce that's in here out. All right, now that all that water's in there, you're gonna wanna put in your paste. Now, make sure you get the same brand, the Contadina, or any other brand you feel like doing, except for Hunt's. And you wanna do 12 ounces of this. Now, since it's not the puree that we have in here, we have the sauce, you're gonna want to maybe add in another thing of paste. Now, if you're doing puree, don't worry about doing the extra paste because it'll get thick enough. Now, with the sauce, it makes it a little soupy, so that's why I'm gonna add in another thing of paste just to thicken it up. But then if it's too thick, I'll add more water. So just kind of, when you put the paste in, just test it out, you know, whisk it in and just test it. If you feel like getting thick, don't add the extra paste. But if it's still kind of soupy, do that. So I just whisk that in, and see, I can already feel that it's not as thick. So we're definitely gonna have to add in the extra paste. So let me add in the extra paste. This one's not gonna come out easy. So this is just another like 6-ounce can. So don't worry about needing it. If you have like one of those squeeze ones, just kind of add the amount that you think you need. You don't need to do the full-on 6-ounce can, but I'm doing it just so it probably will get a little thicker. And like I said, if it feels too thick, just add in a little extra water so it's not super thick. Because you don't want the sauce super thick. You want it thick, but not like thick with 2 C's. Plus, when you throw the leftovers in the freezer, so you can just have leftovers for another time, it will thicken up in the freezer as well. Yeah, see, now it's starting to feel thick. So we're gonna let that do its thing. Now that the paste and sauce, you know, puree is in here, you're gonna add in some sugar because this is very acidic. So you're gonna want, as my dad has written, you're gonna want about a teaspoon of sugar. Now, sugar is just used to just cut down the acidity and, you know, make it kind of sweet. You don't need it to be super sweet. Sometimes I just add in a little pinch, but we're gonna follow Dad's to a T. So 1 teaspoon of sugar. And then we obviously whisk it so it can be all combined and everything. So now that the sauce is basically done, except for one last ingredient, but I will explain that later.
It's time to make the meatballs.
So for your meatballs, you're gonna want half of a medium onion, and make sure your diced onions are like kind of on the smaller side. You don't want them too big because they're not gonna sit in the meatballs that well. They won't stay in the meat. So half the medium onion. We obviously use the other half for your sauce. So half medium onion. All right, now that your onions are in, you're going to want your meat. Now it consists of half ground chuck and then half pork sausage.
It's important to mix different meats for flavor. So I use a half a pound of ground chuck and a half a pound of ground pork.
Now, you don't have to do pork sausage. My dad switched to pork sausage after, you know, a while of doing his spaghetti, but he used to do just regular old ground pork. But he decided, you know what, ground pork sausage will be better and has a lot more flavor. So that's why he switched to the pork sausage. So we're gonna put in that pork sausage for him. And as you can see, my sleeves, I had to pull them way up because this chef coat, way too big for me. As you could tell, my dad was a big man. And normally I get from the store, I get a pound of each of these, and that's because I want to save a little bit of money with just getting the meat ready. So if I make this again, I have the meat already here. So you're all good for that. So you don't have to get a full pound of each. If you just want to make it that one time, just get a half pound. So now that the meat's in, we're going to add in a cup of Italian breadcrumbs. Now make sure you get the Italian. We normally get the Progressive, I think that brand is called. We get that brand, but you can get any Italian seasoning. I mean, I'm sure the, you know, generic is just the same thing. I mean, it's basically the same thing. You name brands, you just want the name, so don't worry about it. Get whatever Italian breadcrumbs you want. And then you want to add in your eggs. Now, normally my dad just did 1 egg, but we've learned after experimenting, me and my siblings, that 2 eggs actually is a better binder for this. It makes it a little more stiff, so it's easier to mold. So we're gonna do 2 eggs. All right, now after you have your eggs in there, that's basically all my dad did, but I'm doing it a tiny bit different. And since I'm not the one that's gonna eat these, I know I'm not one for ground beef or anything. That's just my preference. I don't eat the meatballs, but my husband and all my rest of the family eats it. I'm just not into the ground beef. That's just me. So maybe someday I'll get over it, but for right now, no. Especially with the extras I add in, which is, you know, a little sprinkle of the red pepper flakes, just like that we put into our sauce. So I'm just gonna put a little shake in there. I'd say if we're going to do measurement wise, probably about, let's say like a teaspoon. So we'll do a teaspoon. I don't really measure with these, but if you don't want it too hot, put a teaspoon. And then we do a little sprinkle of Parmesan cheese. Now I would have grated my own, but I'm too lazy. So we're just going to put in just the regular old, already ground up and grated Parmesan cheese. Now, like I said, just put a little sprinkle in there. You don't need to do too much. I guess it depends on what your heart desires. I just want to save this so I can have this with my sauce later. And that is it. That is all you need for your meatballs, is just all those ingredients. Very simple, not too much. All the seasonings, basically the breadcrumbs, and a little bit of the red pepper flakes and the Parmesan. So that's literally all you need for these meatballs. Now, let me get on some gloves and we'll start mixing this together. Now, I'm sure you're salty too that I didn't have my ring on, but that's because, like I always say, I don't want to get them dirty. And that's why I have gloves on, so I don't get any of the meatballs in my nails. Because that's going to be gross to get out. So that's why I'm wearing the gloves. Now, you want to hand mix this because it's just easier. You know, it's how, you know, the Italians make it. So I'm just going to do it by hand. And that's how my dad always did it. And I was always the helper doing the meatballs. I was in charge of doing meatballs when my dad would make it and I was there. That was my job. And I always found it so gross. But sometimes when he'd make it, the meat would still be cold, like very cold, because he would just take it out of the fridge. And let me tell you, that was so cold. But luckily for me, I just bought these meats not too long ago, like literally this day, literally today. So when I'm making this. And yeah, so it's not super cold now, but if you're using your leftover meat, if you did the pound, just be careful, it's going to be very cold. So don't freeze your hands. That's why I'm kind of wearing the gloves, to kind of protect myself a little bit. But yeah, I was always the one to help my dad with these meatballs, and that's always what me and him would do together. Was I would do the meatballs, get it ready for them, and then we'd roll them up and shape them with our little meatball scoop. All right, that looks pretty mixed, so let's start putting this in the sauce.
We're gonna use a meatballer like this. You could really use any size that you want. Now, as you can see, I am putting in the meatballs raw. I just feel it gives it a little better flavor. You can certainly fry the meatballs like many people do, but I feel this way, this will incorporate more of the flavor of the sauce into the meatball, and then also the meatball will add some additional flavor to the sauce. So what we'll do is we'll keep on doing this until we're at the end of the meat. Or when you're dropping the meatball in, do it like this. This way you don't get any sauce on you.
All right, now that our meatballs are all in, and I kind of swished it around to make sure that it's all covered. Make sure your meatballs are covered because you want it all to cook in unison. And have this sitting on medium-low. So about, on my stove, I do it between 2 and 3. And like on one that you had to like press and everything to set your temp, do it about like 2 like clicks or beeps or whatever you would want to call it. So like I said, about medium low, maybe even like a little like low but not too low, because you want this to cook low and slow. And you're going to want to cook this for about an hour and 30 minutes, so an hour and a half. And you're going to add in one last ingredient, but that'll be at like about when there's 15 minutes left, you're going to want to add in some oregano. You're going to want to add in about 2 teaspoons worth. So this is at the end. And the reason why...
All right. You don't want to add the oregano too soon because it may give a little bit more of a bitter flavor.
He always added that at the end. Maybe to give it a little extra flavor, and then you'll obviously whisk it in, and then your spaghetti will be done. So we're going to let this sit, cook on low medium for an hour and 30 minutes. I will see you guys in an hour and 15. Now, while our sauce is going and about maybe an hour in, like 30 minutes left, I start doing my noodles. Now, I have my pot already sitting here, and it's gonna be boiling, and then you add a little pinch of salt in there to let it go, and then you put in your noodles. Now, you can choose any noodles you want. You can do the long spaghetti ones, you can do fun shaped ones. I consider doing ones that have kind of ridges in them too. It catches the sauce better, so maybe the medium shells or like penne with the ridges. But you can do like any noodle, it doesn't matter. It just sticks better when it has ridges. But the noodles I'm doing today are the ones that my dad knew I loved so much. And I have a bit of it in this little container right here. And it is farfalle, which is the bow tie. Just like a little bow tie. But these are the noodles that I use because it's my all-time favorite. My dad knew I loved these noodles, so he would always pick these sometimes. But he usually would do either the spaghetti, medium shells, or penne. That's normally the ones he would do. Sometimes he'd do ziti, but it would depend. But normally he'd do this bow tie just for me. So I will get these noodles going and we will be at the finish line. I will see you then.
And that's how we do spaghetti sauce.
And we have the final product. Okay, I'll give you a nice little close up. As you can see, the cheese is already going in there. And you can never have enough cheese. Isn't that right? Anyway. So that's what it'll look like at the end. And you don't need me to taste test it. We already know it's going to taste good. So that is all for this video. I hope you enjoyed. And I have a confession to make. It's actually me. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.